Hello everybody, it's Joshua, and today I'd like to talk to you all about determinism. First of all, I'd like to give you a brief description of what determinism is. Determinism is the idea that everything that happens, every action in the universe is set and determined by the Big Bang, the particles that were released by the Big Bang, and the which their initial state of these particles cause them to collide in a certain way that causes everything to happen in the universe, and essentially means that there's one possible end of the universe based on the initial conditions in the universe. And the main philosophical kind of idea with this is that this extends to humans and our interactions and the, so to speak, choices that we make in our lives, and how we don't really have any control. But then we're presuming this word "we," which we'll get into how proper pronouns fit into this whole determinism idea. But so I was introduced to determinism pretty early on by my older brother, who described it to me. He didn't really call it determinism per se, but he described to me the idea basically that we don't have any control over anything, and that, you know, the interactions within our brain, electrical signals and all that, we don't really... Just basically the idea that everything we do, everything that happens is determined by environment and our electrical signals in our brain and all that, electrical synapses and neurons or whatever. But anyway, so I was introduced to the idea of determinism later by obviously Jesus, who's a YouTuber I follow. He does a lot of philosophical topics in his videos. I've watched many of them, most of them in fact, probably. I followed him for a while. I still watch his videos, and it's a big inspiration to me. I've always found his videos thought-provoking and interesting. But anywho, so first what I wanted to talk about was the idea of self and what our language has tricked us into, the way our language has tricked us into thinking of people not as objects but as some other class of existence. We use words like I, he, she, we, all these words to separate ourselves from it or that, or... But anyway, the point is that the way I see it, we make decisions, but there's only one possible outcome that our decision-making process can come to. But what I want to talk about is the decision-making process, which we, in our language and in the way we think, usually, typically, is we try to put our decision-making process and the choice to make on some external quantum level, even though just because before, while our language was created, we didn't have the scientific advancement to know how the brain is where our thoughts reside and where everything happens in terms of decision-making. So what I see is that the self is the decision-making process, whether that be physical or not, whether there is a spiritual component or not. There is a choice made by a decision-making process. So when you say that determinism conflicts the idea of free will, you're putting the idea of self outside of reality, and I just don't get the dichotomy between not determinism and non-determinism in terms of free choice and free will. We make decisions, but you have to agree with me, every decision we make has a reason, and that reason is encoded in the visual, auditory, any kind of stimuli in the brain, and that, the idea of personality is very much interacts with determinism, because we think that everyone has their own personality, everyone has certain aspects about them, certain ways they react to certain situations, whether that be some people say either it's just the arrangement of neurons or that it's some spiritual, unseen, an intangible thing. But regardless, there are traits to each person that determine the choices they make. And like if you like the color red, for example, you always pick the red water bottle when you're at the, I don't know, the mountaineering store, EMS or some shit. If you are a nice guy, you won't steal your friend's cookie, you know? There's just certain things, you know? But anyway, so what I'm saying, what this kind of branches into is that the intangible, the idea of either, we'll get into religion later, but the idea of anything outside of reality, that is subject to determinism also. I think it's very nearsighted to see a dichotomy between determinism and multiple planes of existence and God and religion. I think that if there are, you know, alternate planes of existence, heaven, hell, I think that you can, just as you can look at the universe as one deterministic equation, you can look at the entire system, the whole system, everything, all planes of existence as one equation also, and you know, God and religion, the ideas of that. I mean, I'm personally kind of an atheist myself, but I mean, I was raised Catholic and all that, but you know, the whole idea of the Christian Judeo-Christian God is that he embodies this absolute moral code and that he is the perfect being and always does the right thing. So wouldn't it make sense that he would always react to the same state of Earth in the same way if all variables are held constant and all that? Like, wouldn't the only if there's an absolute moral code, and wouldn't it make sense that he would always split the Red Sea and, you know, and all that other crap, fucking Ark and shit, telling Noah or warning him of a flood? Wouldn't he do all that always? Wouldn't he always make that decision given the same circumstances? So the way I see it, determinism is mainly a materialistic concept, but it can be applied to the immaterial if something like that exists. But anyway, so what I think is the most difficult thing for people to accept and kind of grasp their head around in determinism is the idea that if somebody actually knew all variables, all conditions within a system, they would be able to, you know, see all future states of that system, which actually the best argument I've heard against determinism, or not directly against it, but that changed the way I look at it, was when I was talking to my cousin one time, and he went through a deterministic phase. He kind of bought the whole idea, and but he kind of grew out of it, which is interesting, and he kind of I don't know, developed his own ideals and stuff, and kind of rejects the, I don't know. But anyway, so he's not a determinist really anymore, but I was talking to him, and one thing he told me was something about, I don't know whether it's it's some thing in physics where supposedly the direction a electron, I don't really, like, I'm not very good at this, like, microphysics shit, but so, like, the path an electron takes is random, but what I said is it can't be random. There has to be some reason for it to travel in that direction. There has to be some subatomic particle smaller, some quark gluons or whatever, something we can't even imagine to comprehend the small scale of that we can't possibly detect by any scientific means to this day. There must be. And then what he said to me is that everything can be divided up infinitely into infinite levels of variation, infinitely small particles, infinitely small units of variation. It's like the idea of, you know, the pot of gold at the end of the room. You can travel halfway from the way you can travel halfway, and then you can travel half of the way you've come every time you step. You'll never reach the pot of gold. You can always, there's always something smaller. There's always more division. It's kind of the idea of continuous physics is just everything infinitely divides within itself, or whatever. So what that means essentially is that yes, there is one possible ending to the universe. There is one possible ending to any situation, but it cannot possibly be determined. It cannot possibly be known because there are infinite levels of variation. So what that means essentially is that it's mathematically incalculable, or you can't possibly, even the smallest physical reaction, I guess you can know certain things about it, but you cannot possibly know the whole of the future state based on, or you cannot, because it contains an infinite amount of information, you cannot possibly know any future state of the universe. So we've covered the idea of self, which, I mean, as Babbling Brahma stated before, there's no real separation between us and our environment, so there isn't a self and all that good stuff. But definitely, if you're a follower of me, check out, obviously, Jesus. Watch some of his earlier works, watch some of his current works, videos, and all that. Very thought-provoking stuff, and it's been real, and I hope you all find this entertaining, and I'm out.